Welcome back, everyone, to Farms and Frontlines. I'm your host, Max Terzano. I am joined, as always, by Jessica Rudo.
Hey there, everyone.
It's been quite some time. Took a
A minute.
nice holiday siesta over Christmas and New Year's and had what I hope was a relaxing vacation. I don't know about you, but I never feel very relaxed after a long vacation and get back to work like refreshed and ready to go. That's rarely the way it works for me.
Yeah, I never really have a vacation. So
Well, there you go. All right, and I
this
feel even better now.
this past break though, I thought was good. I liked this past break. I didn't travel anywhere. I didn't have any
That's the
side
dream.
projects. Yeah, it was in sweatpants for a solid 10 days. It was awesome.
That's perfect.
Yeah.
Well, I'm glad it was relaxing for you. I hope it was
Yeah.
nice for everybody else, but it is almost February. It will be February
Crazy.
by the time this episode airs. So I think our break is over. We got to get back
Yeah.
into it.
Super Bowl predictions.
Oh man, I just hope it's not the Chiefs
I
again.
so it's the
You
Eagles.
know? Yeah, I guess. I was hoping for
I
something
know.
completely different, but
I saw
once it was Eagles Chiefs, I kind of like forgot the
yeah.
Super Bowl was even coming up. Yeah,
I
whatever.
saw something where it's like, I hope everyone loses.
Yeah. Saw a map that had Kansas City and Philly
Yeah, yeah.
highlighted as like cheering for their respective teams, and then the rest was like giant meteor.
Yeah.
Like, well, yeah, that sounds right. But yes,
Yeah.
you had a good idea because we're about to
Mhm.
launch our first season of
Mhm.
Farms and Frontlines, which might sound ridiculous because we're however many episodes in. But
Yeah.
what we're going to do is start kind of having themed episodes where we dig deep into stuff, and we'll talk more about that at the end of this episode. But you had a good idea to talk about something that's kind of, what is the word I'm looking for? Prominent? It's kind of
Relevant,
prominent right now.
pertinent. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Yep. That is relevant and pertinent right now,
And prominent.
and also prominent. And sticking with the P's, it is all about
Ah,
Panama.
Panama
Um,
Canal.
the Panama Canal, which, as anybody who's been paying attention to the White House knows that it's been mentioned quite a bit. And we thought we'd kind of dig into that. And this is more the front lines portion. I think we're just going to cover kind of a lot of the history that goes on here. Jess did a really great deep dive, and I'm looking at the notes. It's just a lot of fun. So I'm just going to let you take it away and probably pipe in with questions here or there.
Yeah, so here in the US, the Panama Canal has made a lot of headlines recently. Newly reelected President Trump has made
Mm-hmm.
some statements about manifest destiny and reacquiring the Panama Canal. And some of the reasoning behind that is, it breaks a treaty and the US is being charged an exorbitant amount more than other countries. So I just thought we would go into that and kind of see what's the history behind it. And there's quite a bit of history. So, since the Spanish and the Portuguese discovered that there was a world in the Pacific, there was a desire to create a shortcut through it. In 1513, so I used to teach Latin American history, Spanish conquistador Vasco de Balboa, who, if you get a chance, is quite the character.
I
He
believe
has
it.
he has a crazy history in and of himself. But Balboa first crosses the Isthmus of Panama. Now, I have braces, so this word that I'm going to say a couple of times is not my friend Isthmus.
We'll just call it the Christmas of Panama.
The tiny portion, the smallest part of land, but it is considered by some to be one of the most important geographical events to happen on Earth in the last 60 million years is the Isthmus of Panama. It had a huge impact on the Earth's climate, its environment. It shut down the flow of water between the two oceans, so that land bridge rerouted currents to both the Atlantic and the Pacific. The Atlantic current was forced northward and eventually settled into what is now called the Gulf Stream. And this stream brings warmer Caribbean waters to the Northeast Atlantic. The Isthmus of Panama directly and indirectly influenced ocean and atmospheric circulation patterns, which regulates rainfall patterns, which sculpted landscapes. And the land bridge also made it easier for animals to migrate. So, one thing that I just thought was adorable is the raccoon is one of the animals that moved north over the land bridge because previously it was only found in South America.
That's crazy. I had no idea. Like,
This tiny piece of land has a huge impact on the entire world.
yeah,
So,
like who would have thought?
and why not cut right through the middle of it?
Yeah. What could possibly go wrong?
So, all right, 1513, Spanish conquistador Balboa first crosses this landmass, right, of Panama.
Hmm.
In 1534, King Charles of Spain ordered a survey of literally everywhere in Central America. Anywhere
That's
you could
wild.
cut through. Yeah, he's looking for anywhere that you can cut through. But at the time, it was just too costly and way too impractical for the time. So they're like, nah, it's not
Right.
possible right now.
So I mean, like, what do they have back then? Like shovels?
Oh, yeah.
You know, like we want you
They
to
have
dig through this country.
they have good ideas.
Yeah, yeah. There you go.
1668, English physician Sir Thomas Browne specifically proposed the Isthmus, Panama, as the most convenient place for a canal. Just thinking about the size of it, because it's the most narrow. It's not until the late 1800s, though, that canals were looked at as a way to show engineering prowess. 1811, there's a German who publishes an essay about the geography of Central America and concluded that Nicaragua was actually the most suitable to build a canal because it
Hmm.
has a pretty big network of lakes, and Lake Nicaragua is a pretty significant one.
Hmm.
And based on this essay, a lot of other countries are going to not think about anywhere else, but just focus on Nicaragua,
Okay.
which influences the U.S. later. But a couple of things come out of that. The U.S. and England signed a treaty that if either one of them gets a canal, they will share it with the other one, which basically said like no foreign influence in Latin America.
Right.
Not
Like
that
we mentioned
the
during our
United
Haiti
States,
episodes.
yeah. Not the United States has any right to say this claim, but they do, and whatever, it is what it is.
Yeah.
There's another treaty in 1846. It's called the Malarnio-Bidlack Treaty, and basically the names of these treaties are the people that kind of like coordinated to get this treaty signed.
Right. And
It's
there's
important.
it sounds like
Yeah,
there's going to be a lot of like names and stuff in this, so
there are. Yeah,
just
so
bear
I'll
with
try
us on
to. Yeah,
that.
I'll try to keep it as simple as possible.
Hmm.
It's important because it sets a precedent. This treaty in 1846 is negotiated with New Granada. So in
Hmm.
Latin American history, Colombia is not always Colombia. Panama is not always Panama. At one point, they are one giant country. It was called Gran Colombia until Samar Bolivar kind of gets kicked out. And it's renamed New Granada. Granada was never mind, I won't go into that. But New Granada.
It is super interesting though, because like as someone who has
Yeah.
not studied Latin American history, like I don't know the history of the countries or anything. So it's cool to read that and be like, oh wow, I had no idea.
Yeah, so New Granada is basically Colombia, Panama, Ecuador, Venezuela. And the treaty in 1846 is giving the U.S. rights to intervene militarily in the isthmus and transit through it. And that is happening. That treaty is signed between the U.S. and New Granada.
Hmm,
So it's important
interesting.
to remember that. That's 1846 because we're going to keep going.
Putting you on the spot. Who was the president in 1846?
It's the Mexican American War. Who sends the people to the Mexican American War? Let me think. Polk. It's Polk.
Yep,
Yep.
I had to look it up, but
Yep.
yeah.
It's Polk. Because I was trying to think, yeah, just thinking with the Mexican American War. Polk sends troops down to Mexico.
Yep, James K. Polk. So I guess that during this time period, there was just a big focus on like South.
Yeah, because think 1846, it's right, Mexican American War. The US acquires through force a ton of land, new, like,
Right. Yeah.
right,
Okay.
huge amount of land. Before that, stuff with Texas was going on. Texas had seceded and then became part of the United States again.
Right. Right.
So yeah, there's, all right, what else is going south here? How do we take it? How do we keep what we just fought for ours, right?
Hmm. Gotcha.
Um,
That makes sense.
and then 1848, gold is found, and now the need to move through that Central American area faster increases.
Right.
The demand is exploited by any, savvy businessman, but an American businessman called William Henry Aspinwall, he used to run steamships from New York City to Panama, and then he set up, basically it's going to end up being a railroad across the country of Panama, and then a steamship from the other side of Panama up to California.
Wow.
So he sets up a logistical network to move stuff without the canal being there.
Can you imagine how annoying that must have been? Load
Yeah.
a steamboat full of gold, goes down to Panama, unload it
Uh-huh.
onto a railroad, it goes just right
Yeah.
across that, unload it, ship it again, unload. Like, oh
Yeah.
my gosh.
It's an insane amount of work to get this up and running, this whole little system.
Oh, yeah, the
It's
logistics itself is just wild.
Yeah, it
And
takes
it's not like
5
they're
years.
emailing each other, right? Like they're not calling
Yeah.
people on their cell phones like, "Hey,
Yeah.
what's the status of the project?"
Yeah. It takes $8 million to build it, and about 12,000 workers die from disease.
Wow.
But they still continue with it, right? And set up this railroad, set up, the whole thing. So fast forward a little bit, 1869, the Suez Canal opens. Suez Canal is a shortcut through the Mediterranean and the Red Seas. Suez Canal took 10 years to build. It opens under French control. French engineers are the ones that built it. You know what I mean? Planned it and built it.
Right, right, right.
This is looked at as like the height of intellectual, I don't know. It's just looked at as these people are the smartest out there. Look at what they just did. So
Right,
everybody
kind of
else
like
is like,
an engineering marvel.
yeah. So canal FOMO kicks into hyperdrive. Everybody's like, no, we need a canal. We got to show that we're super smart at this, right?
Can you
They,
imagine just people all over, like just examining maps, being like, "What about here? Can we build a map? Can we do it here?
yeah, right.
Look at this
Like,
isthmus. Find me
yeah,
an isthmus."
you know what? I'm an engineer. I could do this. Shit, let's go.
Yeah, I could do this. We'll show those
Who knows?
French.
Yeah, yeah. Anyway, so the first thought, again, kind of thinking back to that German who wrote the essay, U.S. is going to try Nicaragua in 1870. The president then is Grant, and that continues for a while. Not shockingly, it's expensive. A lot of people die. It's a
Yeah.
really tough project. Yeah. The French are going to attempt a Panama Canal. They start in 1881. It's the same engineer that did the Suez Canal. His name is Ferdinand de Lesseps.
Hmm.
Ha ha. He surveyed the Panama area. He figured out the best spot to do this. The French worked with the Colombian government. At this point, it's still New Grenada, right?
Okay, gotcha.
French work with that government, and they come to an agreement where they will own that area for 99 years and be allowed to dig a canal and exploit it. This agreement is called the Wise Agreement. But it's
Hmm.
important to note that there is an agreement in place that was agreed to by both sides, the French and, it's the Colombian government.
Right.
There's a huge labor force brought in by the French to start digging the canal. 90% are Afro-Caribbeans. Most of them are from the West Indies. Despite their being from the area, they are not acclimated to Panama.
Right.
And they don't have the immune system for Panama because there are huge death tolls. There's like 20,000 people, about 200 a month, that die due to malaria and yellow fever. The area is very expensive to build on. The rainy season makes these like massive landslides, and it's just like overall pandemonium. The French end up bailing on this in 1889. So they tried for 8 years to do this, and it's just too costly in every sense of the word. Lesseps, the Suez Canal engineer,
Mm-hmm.
he kept the money flowing and kept quiet that the targets were not being met.
Oh my goodness.
Yes, the project actually goes bankrupt in 1889. It equates to, in like 2024 terms, $9.73 billion.
Oh my
It's
goodness.
so expensive. And then so people, of course, start getting prosecuted because the French government is like, what is going
What
on?
happened? Yeah, like where's the money?
Yeah.
Why don't we have a
Right.
product? What's happening? Oh my
um,
gosh.
People that get prosecuted, obviously, de Lesseps gets thrown in jail for 5 years for misappropriation of funds.
Sounds
But
appropriate.
Gustav Eiffel, the Eiffel Tower creator, he gets prosecuted. It's just a big deal. It's a huge scandal. It's
Wow.
pretty nuts. Yeah.
I wonder if we could find like a newspaper article, like a
Oh,
French
sure.
newspaper article. Wouldn't that be interesting?
I bet that was like ladies' tea, like ho ho. You know what I mean?
Did you
Like
hear about Sir Eiffel, Monsieur Eiffel?
eat my croissant and gossip. I bet.
Croissant.
I know. All right. Anyway, so U.S. in 1903, new president is Teddy Roosevelt. He and the U.S. Senate are really interested in scooping up the Panama Canal project and completing it. Again, the canal is thought of as engineering marvel and equated to national dominance. The Senate drafts up an agreement that would give New Grenada 10 million down and an annual payment that would grant the U.S. a renewable lease in perpetuity from the government is centered in Colombia on the
Okay,
land
right.
proposed for the canal.
Gotcha.
So The government of New Grenada rejects it. And not just like rejects it, but they unanimously reject it. They're like, absolutely not. Because they are like, you are going to threaten our sovereignty, and then you are in no way compensating us correctly.
That doesn't
Roosevelt's
sound like
like,
something Roosevelt would do.
Roosevelt's like, okay, cool. No problem. Hold my beer. Watch this. Roosevelt is like, okay, so in New Grenada, there's two areas. What we now know as the nation of Panama, kind of like if you're looking at like a state in the United States,
Hmm.
like Panama is its own state, Colombia is its own state. Okay, so
Right.
the national government in Colombia is not going to work with us. Panama will work with us, but they just need to be their own nation.
Super
So
simple.
we're just going to back a separatist movement and have Panama be its own, declare independence and be its own nation.
Wow.
It's crazy. Like Roosevelt sends the Navy to both the Pacific and the Atlantic side of Panama. They start sending them aid. They start sending what they need to like basically back an entire separatist movement. The US
Wow.
even played into like Colombia's civil war that was going on between the liberals and the conservatives, which in Latin America is a very common occurrence during this time period.
Mm.
1902, right? The US is playing into that. They're even like the mediator to try to help end that civil war. But as they're mediating the end to Colombia's civil war, they even sent an arbitrator so that an engineer could start planning the canal's construction before they even got any rights to the land.
So they're just like, this is happening.
They're like, "Yep, we're just checking it out. Just keep fighting eternally while we go ahead and get started on this project."
Don't mind us.
It's fine. It's cool. All right. Colombian troops couldn't negotiate the jungle, and Panama declared its independence on 3 November 1903. The U.S. immediately recognizes Panama as a new nation. So they are the first to do
Huh.
it. And Panama thanks the U.S. for their support with a treaty that gives the U.S. rights to the land associated with the canal. This treaty is called the Hay Buna Varela Treaty. And it's, again, the people that are involved in signing the treaty. This treaty also establishes the canal zone, which is about 5 miles on either side of the canal. There's a 99-year lease established, but the verbiage in the contract also says in perpetuity. So it says on
Right.
one
Okay.
section it's 99 years, this lease, but there's another one that says in perpetuity.
Mm.
This is a
Okay.
classic example of gunboat diplomacy. Latin America, this happens a lot with the US. And Roosevelt has his quote, speak softly and carry a big stick. That kind of comes out of this with the Panama Canal.
Okay.
Panama ends up being a U.S. protectorate from 1903 to 1939, which, just a side note, because this country is also coming in the news for the same reasons, Greenland was also a U.S. protectorate in 1941
Hmm.
and 1944. It was so
And
that
what
they could help against a possible German invasion.
and what does it mean to be a U.S. protectorate?
Basically, the U.S. will protect the area, but it does not have any legal claims to it.
Gotcha.
So it's almost a guardian.
Right. So it's like a treaty kind of thing. Like you touch them, you're
Yeah,
gonna have to
kind
deal
of.
with us. You know.
Kind of, yeah.
Okay.
It's kind of like having a big brother. You're not really related.
Exactly.
Yeah. So right. So now a treaty is established with Panama to work with the U.S. To work on the Panama Canal. So the U.S. paid France 40 million for the excavation that was already done, and they bought all the equipment. The equipment ends up needing to be replaced. It's all old and shoddy, but they pay for it anyway. The U.S. pays Panama 10 million for this canal, and then follow-on payments of 250,000 each year. So the U.S. officially starts building it in 1904. One of the first things that the chief engineer, John Frank Stevens, does is rebuild the entire infrastructure. So including workers' housing, the water system, repair stations, the cafeterias, so that workers actually could live in the area comfortably, and they actually want to. And that's a hope to help recruit people because they needed a ton of people to work on this canal project.
That makes sense. I mean, you don't
Yeah.
want to be like, hey, you want to come build this canal? It sucks living here, and you'll be here for years.
And you might die, but
You might
hey.
die. Look at the past. Yeah, lots of people died. You could too.
You could be a part of history. Well, so yeah, a lot of people dying from disease. So one of the things that happens is a chief sanitation officer is appointed. He's an army colonel named William Gorgas, and he immediately implements some findings that were made possible by Army doctor Walter Reed and Colombian epidemiologist. Is
I
that
know
it?
that name.
Yeah, Walter Reed. Yeah, and then
Yeah, yeah, yeah. An
if you
epidemiologist.
The Cuban, yep, that guy, Carlos Benet. I always like to throw there was also a Latin American element to that too, right? There's a Cuban
Hmm.
doctor also working on that.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Those two find out that yellow fever and malaria are waterborne. So Gorgas, he's fumigating buildings, he's minimizing standing water, he's using mosquito nettings, window screens, stuff like that. He vastly cuts down on diseases. As there's still, though, about 5,600 people that die from either disease or accidents. So still a sizable number, but the amount dying from disease has decreased significantly.
They should really name a medical facility after that guy.
All right. Continuing on, there's a lot of arguments about how to actually build this canal. Unlike the Suez Canal, the Panama Canal needs water tables and I don't know, levels and whatever. I don't know. I'm not
You've
an
never
engineer.
built a canal before?
I don't know. I'm making like motions with my hands up and down, like you're gonna see that and know what I mean.
Perfect for this audio format.
Yeah. Anyway, it's more complicated than initially thought. So there is a chief engineer brought in. He replaces Stevens. He's a general in the army. His name is George Washington Goethals. Goethals is a West Point grad. Here at West Point, there's actually a ton of his stuff that's here. It's really interesting.
I was going to say his name sounds familiar too. Is there like a
Yep.
bridge named after him, like going into New York or something?
Goethals?
Yeah, I thought there was. I could be losing my mind, but
I don't know. I could ask my friend Google real quick.
yeah, there is in
Goethals
Staten Island.
Bridge. Oh yeah?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, in Staten Island.
All right. Side point. It wasn't
Yeah.
that important that he got one in New York. He got it in Staten Island.
Yeah, but that's still cool. Oh, it's a cool looking bridge.
I know, right? Yeah. If you're bored and not doing anything, go ahead and look up Goethals Bridge.
Oh, and he has a road. All
All
right. Is he
right.
from there? I wonder if he's from that area. Anyway,
Maybe.
whatever.
Yeah. Sorry. Back on track.
Anyway, yeah. So he's done this. He's actually has some engineering background and he's worked around canals.
Right.
And he recognized it's just a massive effort to like get this canal built. There's a huge reliance on railroads. So remember, I talked about earlier that they set up a railroad, but
Yeah.
a lot more really robust infrastructure around railroads is brought in. So these dirt movers, they're all steam powered shovels, cranes, rock crushers, concrete mixers, all this stuff. It's all built in the US, which is a big thing.
Mm-hmm.
And then, it's just a lot of power, brought down to Panama to get this thing cranked out.
Wow.
Still takes a long time though. So 10 October 1913. The president is now Woodrow Wilson. He sends a telegraph that gives the go-ahead to blow the Gamboa Dike. When that thing is gone, the Atlantic and the Pacific Oceans will meet.
That must have been so cool.
Yeah.
Like, I really hope the workers and stuff, like, people, like, took time to, like, drink that in and not just be like, whatever. Like, that's so cool.
That is definitely just a thing that hadn't happened in a long time. I don't know. It's nuts.
Yeah.
It's pretty neat. Yeah. The first thing to pass through this opening, this canal, was called the Alexandra La Valley. And it was a floating crane. It was a self-propelled floating crane. I
guess that's appropriate.
I hope it had like a little tiny like noise when it was doing it too, And then the first real ship is the SS Cristobal, and it goes through on 3 August 1914. The U.S. in 2024 terms spent $15.2 billion, and it is the biggest engineering project for the U.S. to date.
Wow, to date, huh?
To date, yep.
Wow, that's pretty cool. And still at a fraction of the cost that the French took to not do it.
Yeah, that's right.
Wow.
So the canal is now open. It's 1914 and the canal's open. There is an immediate concern with Panamanians about the U.S. control of the canal and the zone around it, because that zone is English speaking, and that's also U.S. held land.
Right. And so like you said, like 5 miles on either side of the canal was English speaking. That's where like the workers came and stuff, and was, I guess, U.S. owned. So it's like this 10-mile stretch, right?
Yep, that's right. Yep.
Wow.
It flares up right after it's open. It flares up again after World War II. The Panamanians felt the zone belonged to them. And this sentiment is followed by a lot of student-led protests, which is also common in Latin America, some like really like bottom-up movements. But because there's all these student protests, it actually leads to an increase in military presence in the canal zone. Another thing, so following this timeline-wise, the Suez Canal crisis in 1956 also influences what's going on in Panama and the U.S. and their relationship.
That
The
makes sense.
Suez, so just very briefly, the Suez Crisis is the British, French, and Israel invade Egypt in response to Egypt's blockade of the Suez Canal. The British and the French forces joined in a hope to overthrow the Egyptian president Nasser and regain control of the Suez Canal. Nasser had just nationalized that canal. So
Right.
money being lost and a lot of people being like a little upset over that.
Yeah, I mean, I
US, yeah,
remember what was it just a couple years ago when the Evergreen ship
yeah,
went
yeah.
sideways and blocked the canal, and it was just
That's
chaos
right.
for like a week. Like I can't
That's
imagine
right.
if like they purposefully blocked it in this day and age. I'd be like, "Ooh,
Yeah, yeah. Because yeah, you remember that and that tiny little
mm-hmm,
it was the crane again, that tiny little crane, like
yeah,
working to make that ship get out of there.
yeah." Somebody was like, "Send over the Alexander LaValle.
Yeah, that's right. He has experience crossing
He knows what he's
canals.
doing."
It's ironic. So the ending of the Suez Crisis, the U.S., Soviet Union, and the UN put a ton of political pressure on Britain and France and Israel to withdraw.
Hmm.
So the Panamania and
Panamania.
Panamanians, Panamanians and Panama were like, WTF, dude? Like, hello, U.S. What do you
Yeah,
think?
yeah.
Yeah,
You're pushing them to leave, but you're still hanging out here.
yeah. It ends up, causing a lot of pressure, and then years later, it's going to evolve into riots. This is going to be called the Martyrs' Day in 1964. So 20 Panamanians and 5 Americans end up killed in these riots.
Wow.
So we moved to Jimmy Carter. So Jimmy Carter just died recently, but he was also
Mm-hmm.
talked about with. Actually, I don't know if President Trump brought him up. I think so, saying how Carter gave the Panama Canal away.
Mm-hmm.
So it comes down to the Torrijos-Carter Treaty. So it's President Jimmy Carter for the U.S. and Omar Torrijos is the Panamanian leader. They signed this treaty, and it's a couple of things. It supersedes the treaty that existed beforehand, where I talked about the 99-year lease or in
Right.
perpetuity.
Mm-hmm.
It guaranteed Panama control of the Panama Canal after 1999. So, like, time to
Okay.
set conditions.
Right.
But it granted the U.S. the right to permanently defend the canal from any threat that might interfere with the neutral service of ships from all nations using that canal.
Oh,
So
that's
that's
interesting.
the part, right? That's what needs to be understood.
Is
This
that
treaty
still
that is
in?
still in
Okay.
effect, still an active treaty between Panama and the U.S. That this treaty gave the U.S. the right to permanently defend the canal from any threat that might interfere with the neutral service of ships from all nations. So,
Interesting.
yes. So the Panama Canal handles only 6% of global maritime trade, but it's still a massive amount that goes through the Panama Canal, right?
Yeah, that you probably saw my note on that, but like I
Yeah.
thought that number would be much bigger than just 6%.
Yeah. And you can fact check me.
Oh no, I believe
I
you. I just I just
Yeah,
thought
yeah.
like for some reason I figured the Panama Canal, they went
At
to
least like
trouble for it. I'm like,
25%, right?
six
Yeah.
percent. Yeah, I
But it's
figured it'd
still
be
a
a lot
ton.
larger than 6% of that.
The problem, it's not a problem. Well, it is a problem for like anybody, but Panama's president and Panama in general is increasing the amount of tariffs that are. So right now, as of January 1st, the fee to go through the Panama Canal has now risen to $12,000 per ship.
Oh,
So, and now there's a whole bunch of other things too, right? Like
what a racket!
you have to have it scheduled at least 14 days out, or else they charge you something. You can't change it. If you're late, they charge you a 250% surcharge
Wow.
on the fee. Yeah, so it's a lot.
Yeah.
So there's a whole bunch of things. If you need a tugboat, there's a fee. Also, all bunch of stuff. It needs to be
Wow.
inspected. There's a fee. Yeah, there's a whole bunch of
So it's
fees
kind of just getting a
associated.
little out of hand.
Yeah, and pay hike went into effect January 1st. So now there's some, and
We're feeling it.
the other thing too. Now the internet is saying that this is a false quotation, but there is a quote that's being referenced. Again, the internet's saying it's not real, but I don't know where it started. That the Panamanian president is saying that he would double that fee for any U.S. warships that went through the Panama Canal. And again, if we're
Hmm.
looking at, it has to be a neutral use of the canal, right? That is where Trump is. That's one of the things that Trump is saying. It's breaking that treaty.
I guess like the Torrijos-Carter Treaty, it really leaves up a lot to interpretation. Trump
Mm-hmm.
could look at that and just be like, oh, well, I see this as defending the canal, or, from the threats that interfere with the neutral service to ships from all nations, blah, blah, blah. Like, just going with
Mhm.
that. So it's really like a little scary.
Yeah. Along with the fees that are increasing and the threat to double the fee for any American warships, Trump is saying that the Panama Canal needs to be taken back by the US because he is saying that the canal is being run by the Chinese. So
Right.
officially, there is not any direct link with China and the ownership of the canal. The Panamanian government swears that they have nothing to do with the ownership of the canal.
Right.
However,
Okay.
there is a Chinese-owned company called Panama Ports Company.
Again, like American farmland
Yeah,
company.
exactly. Yeah.
They're not very creative
That
when it comes
I know, they're like ChatGPT. Give me a good name.
to American best farmland. I think that's what
So
they called it, wasn't it? Like America
yeah,
best
yeah.
farmland. Yeah.
Yeah. So Panama Ports Company is constructing 4 ports in the Panama Canal right now.
Right.
And there's 3 on the Pacific side and 1 on the Atlantic side.
hmm
So coming out of somebody out of CSIS that was saying, this is just increasing the geopolitical tension between the US and China, and that the information regarding cargo would be very useful in the event of a supply chain war. So, China being able to gather the data of what ships are coming through when and what kind of ships are coming through when.
Right.
Yeah.
I saw the tidbit from the article that you put in here with
Yeah.
Ryan Bird from CSIS. It was very interesting. Just a
hmm
little bit about like why the ports matter and how there's
Yeah.
billions of dollars in investments and everything going through there.
Yeah. And that's, it's like we've seen other places and we've talked about with China and other areas. They are increasing the infrastructure, improving the infrastructure,
hmm
but taxing the land without actually owning the land.
It's wild.
It is. And this company owns port building companies all over the world. This is just
Right.
like one small segment of it.
I think it's important too to note it to say, you have it in the notes here, but that in 2017, Panama broke diplomatic ties with Taiwan and formally
Mhm.
established relations with China, which is obviously a huge win for Chinese diplomacy.
Yep.
And even more so, I think it's bigger that Panama became the first Latin American country to join China's Belt and Road Initiative, which
Yep.
is a $1 trillion global infrastructure and investment initiative, which is it's crazy that like you think about that and then
Yeah.
Panama, and then it's leading to the Dominican Republic, El Salvador, Nicaragua, Honduras, all following suit, also severing ties with Taiwan in favor of Beijing. Like that's just I can see why people would be concerned.
hmm
It's not like it's I guess it's the same as like the American farmland stuff where it's like, no, we didn't know that this farm was right next to the Air Force base. We just happened to
Yeah.
buy it.
Yeah.
Like it's like
Right.
this could
Yeah.
definitely be coincidental. But also on the other hand, like,
Maybe not. I
wait a
know.
minute.
Yeah. I was gonna say Grenada just recently also broke ties with Taiwan and had I think they had the president of China. No, I might be making that up. They had some like big
Okay.
time Chinese diplomat there.
Yeah, this was this year. Xi
Xi
Jinping
Jinping?
met with Prime
Yeah.
Minister of Grenada, Dickon Mitchell.
Yeah. And that's not
Daikon?
that long ago. And
It was January 13th.
so when I was in Grenada, I met with the embassy there in the US embassy in Grenada.
Hmm.
And one of the concerns was, China was knowingly like building in Grenada, and Grenada is a tiny, tiny country, but it was still a thing where the youth don't have jobs. They don't want to take over
Right.
farming or tourism.
hmm
And the US doesn't have the money to like influence Grenada with other types of service projects or
Interesting.
whatever. You know what I mean? To
Yeah.
like have that population, who are they now swayed towards? China or the US? And China is able to just pour money into it. So,
Yeah. Make it part of that Belt and Road Initiative and just put like
right,
it's trillions of dollars. So I mean, not
right.
to
Yep.
Grenada obviously, but like the money is available. So yeah,
Right.
the Prime
Yeah.
Minister of Grenada met him in Beijing, which is
hmm
you can see that like we talk not a
Yeah.
lot, but we definitely mention soft power a lot.
hmm
And I think this is you over the past couple of years, you're kind of starting to see a shift
Yeah.
in Central America, at least.
And again, like it said earlier, like these things this is part of the equation where, okay, there's some power flexes happening. How is the US responding to that? And
Right.
in my opinion, this is one of those flexes from President Trump where it's a hard stance, right? It's being a very aggressive stance. But I think everything that we kind of talked about kind of leads into like some of maybe the reasoning behind it. And that doesn't mean for our purposes, right? You and I, our opinions, we're not influencing what we're saying with our opinions of what's going on. But,
exactly. We
just
try to
like
look at the history and these are the facts. Which is in the end, like, if you think of, say, the US does forcefully take back the Panama Canal from a country that has been building their relationships with China. It's not going to go well. Like, there won't be good feelings towards the US. Like, this will not be, like, sure, it might cut down on taxes and fees for a while, but at what cost?
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. So yeah, that's kind of the Panama Canal.
In a nutshell.
I was going to say in a nutshell, but I couldn't think of a good like play on words.
Yeah. I think it's interesting. It has an interesting history. I did not anticipate hearing that, the architect of the Eiffel Tower would get arrested during the French attempt to create a canal. And it went through so many different presidents. Like, we started with Polk, ended with Carter, and now we're talking about it today with Trump. And it's very interesting. But that is that's the Panama Canal. A very high level view. Why we're seeing it in the news so frequently.
Yeah.
That's a little bit of the history behind it, why it's important. I'm still shocked by the 6%. Like, I really did think that number would be higher.
I know.
But
let's see. I'll double check.
Oh no, I even double checked, and
okay, yeah.
You're correct. It's just it just doesn't seem right to me,
Yeah.
It's like, wow, all right. Huh.
I don't remember where I didn't cite it, so then I was like, oh, I'm pretty sure I didn't make that up.
Well, so we talked just before this about the gentleman from CSIS, Ryan Berg, who was talking about Chinese ports in Panama. So, Dr. Berg, if you happen to hear this and want to talk more about Chinese ports in Panama, give us a call.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think that was really good, just kind of, I don't want to say refresher, but just a beginner's intro to Panama and what's going on and why it matters. It kind of leads us into our season 1. This is kind of episode 0, because we're going to get a lot more into Latin American history, and we didn't really talk about food at all in this episode. But for our first season, we're going to cover what's known as the Banana Wars, and we're going to look at different countries in Latin America and American neo-colonialism, expansionism a little bit there. And we talked about gunboat diplomacy a lot and how that plays into shaping the course of Latin American countries. The Banana Wars are really, really interesting with the United Fruit Company and everything that goes on there. So keep an eye out for that. We'll be releasing that. That'll be like 10 to 12 episodes, and then we'll take another break once we're done with that. But in the meantime, we normally we do an episode, then there's a week off, then we have an episode. But we do have some really, really cool guests who want to talk to us about things happening in Ukraine and elsewhere. So if we're lucky enough to get them on and record episodes with them, those will pop up in the between weeks, the off weeks. So keep an eye out for that. Keep listening and let us know what you think, and shoot us any questions or anything like that you might have regarding literally anything we talk about.
Don't forget, if you subscribe, you get a sticker.
Yeah, so subscribe to our newsletter and get a sticker, and know when we might take quote unquote breaks and vacations. So keep up. Any finishing thoughts you'd like to leave off on, Jess?
I'm excited to talk about Latin American history, and I hope you are too, because I mean, we nerd out a lot, but this is going to be me like nerding out.
So it's going to be me asking Jess a lot of questions.
Yeah.
But we do have some really cool guests planned to come on who are more knowledgeable than I am about this stuff, so I get to bother him with questions too. Yay!
Let's go, Dr. Kanjemi.
Woo! So yeah, thank you again, everybody, for listening to Farms and Frontlines. We truly appreciate it. We hope you enjoyed this episode. Hope you learned something, and keep an eye out for our newsletter and more episodes coming soon. Thank you all so much.
All right. Appreciate it. Thanks a lot.